What's going on, everybody? Mark Conway with the Midwest Horror Network. Thank you so much for clicking on this link for the Nightmares podcast. If you do want to hear just the audio version of this podcast, click the Spotify link below.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Nightmares podcast, where we talk about all things horror-related, spooky, comics, games. Yeah.
That was awful.
I don't know. I got to get more creative with these intros.
You've done better.
Yeah, I know. That was not my best intro. Oh, whatever.
You've done worse.
No, I have not done worse. Personally, I think this is my worst. Anyways, today we have a topic, and Mark, do you want to talk about our topic?
I will talk about our topic. So, like I said, we cover anything horror. So, what I did was I wanted to think a little bit outside the box. So, I asked these two gentlemen, and I'm going to ask even myself in this case, what horrific events or serial killers would you love to see turn into a television show or movie that has not already been turned into a television show or a movie? We're giving away a little bit of industry secrets, but, you know, I just assume that most people are lazy and they wouldn't actually do anything about it. So we can just talk freely and openly and have a good time and you know, come up with some cool ideas and see, you know, what everybody has to say. So I'm going to give Zach an opportunity to redeem himself from that really shitty intro and let him go first and talk about his particular picks, about what he might find interesting with serial killers or horrific events.
What I might found?
Yes, that is correct. That is the actual linguistic way to pronounce that sentence.
Sure it is. Okay, so one of the serial killers I found the most interesting, back in, I think it was like 2015 or so, when I was writing my first script for my senior project in school, I was doing a lot of research on serial killers to try to get inspiration for my project, and I stumbled across this guy called Ricardo Ramirez, or Richard Ramirez, and he was deemed the Night Stalker. So he hunted and killed people from June 1984 to August 1985, and his land of the killing was in Los Angeles and San Francisco. This guy raped people, brutalized people, shot, killed, bludgeoned, you fucking name it. This guy was a terrible, horrifying individual. And yeah, it was a pretty bloody massacre, and you know, there's a lot of serial killers that do a lot of bad things, but there was one thing that really made this guy stick out to me, and it was a quote he said, and I thought it was a pretty interesting quote, and a pretty powerful one too. Let me know what you guys think of this. We all got the power in our hands to kill, but most people are afraid to use it. The ones who aren't afraid of it control life itself.
That's horrifyingly true, and very creepy. But
it is probably one of my favorite quotes.
That's actually pretty fucking true, and I would actually even relate that to just people in power in general, the governments and organizations, and you know, not to get too philosophical, but that's actually a good thing that you can say about most large things in the world. The anything that has that much power is a pretty good quote to have. I wouldn't be surprised if half these fucking billionaires have that quote hanging above their door. I mean, that's pretty powerful statement.
But the question you got to ask is, are they actually willing to kill somebody themselves?
No. But they do hold the powers and the reins to have somebody else do it.
I think.
Well, in this quote, life is taken extremely literally.
Yeah. No, well, this is true.
So yeah, if you want to take it at face value, literal, yeah. But if you want to get like really artsy fartsy pretentious on what is life.
One of the things I like about this quote is it actually, you know, puts the meaning of power into perspective. You can have all the fucking money in the world you want, but if I have a knife to your throat, I have the power at that moment, and I could take your life. At the end of the day, we're all still human, and we all die, for the most part, the same. Slit to the throat, you're not surviving that.
Yeah, that's true.
A few extra stabs.
You could survive a slit to the throat. It's survivable. Not likely, but it is survivable.
What about 3 direct stabs to the throat?
Yeah,
highly less likely.
What if I also shove a knife in your eye socket at the same time?
Now you're just getting ridiculous.
That's next week's podcast, Zach. So no, I agree, and actually, there's a lot of really interesting. Okay, so. And Charles Manson had another really interesting one. There was a dude who was interviewing him in jail.
A lot of these serial killers do have pretty interesting quotes, but this one, in particular, that one think of me what you want, spoke to me.
It did.
It's so fucking true.
Well, dude, the line between insanity and genius is often very blurry. But yeah, Charles Manson was getting interviewed, and somebody said, do you have what is your opinion on capital punishment? And do you think that you should be sentenced to death for your crimes and everything? He's like, I don't have the authority to make that opinion. He's like, you have the authority to think what you want to think. And he's like, I think what I'm told to think, don't you? And I'm like that's I don't like that I agree with something that Charlie Manson said.
And what's really fucked up, a lot of these serial killers are a lot smarter than people would like to give them credit for.
Oh, dude, like no, that's what they said about the guy who Son of Sam. Like, one of the guys who was a detective, he's like most of these guys are fucking geniuses.
Yeah.
And they get away with this for a long time. It's dumb luck that they get caught. Do you know? So Richard Ramirez, you know what? They had a weird involvement with AC/DC with him. It was like a big thing in the fucking press. So AC/DC got attacked by the press because Richard Ramirez left an AC/DC hat at one of the crime scenes, and they related the Night Stalker with the song Night Prowler. And they tried to analyze the lyrics and say that everything that Richard Ramirez was doing was exactly the same as he was doing. It's ridiculous. You know what's something funny? Okay.
I was gonna say, they did the same thing with Marilyn Manson with what's it called?
With Columbine.
Yeah, with Columbine.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was you know what's something funny though? As ridiculous as both of those are, at least the one with about Night Prowler had a tiny bit of actual credibility. Do I give them a lot of credibility? No, but at least some of the things, it was kind of like Nostradamus bullshit, where you hear it and you're like, well, maybe it's kind of like
you're starting to stretch as much as those news reports that tried.
I know, but you actually listen to the lyrics and it does sound similar to some of the crimes, but at the end of the day, it's bullshit. Yeah. That guy was crazy.
Here's the thing: if you're a huge fucking band, Slayer, Metallica, you have millions of fans across the world. I'm sure a few of those millions of people have murdered somebody in their day. You can't blame them for somebody's dumbass decisions.
At least one of them is going to be crazy.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah, no, or a lot more than just
like
one.
The amount of times they've tried blaming Call of Duty, Doom, and Grand Theft Auto for like shooters and stuff.
Mortal
it's like
Kombat.
It's
also
Mortal Kombat was a huge one.
Yeah, but they gave up on that. Now it's all fucking GTA and Call of Duty.
So I was watching
back in my day.
Yeah, dude, I was watching behind the music. And I can't remember which one of the young brothers said it, but he's like, I could never figure out why they would target me, and I'm like, hold on. I'm like, hold on. Dude, I'm all for clearly all about artistic freedom and saying whatever the fuck you want to say, but you can't also just play like ignorant and be like, you made a song called Highway to Hell, and Hell's Bells, and then all of a sudden you get blamed for satanic shit, and then you're like, I don't know how that happened. Come on, are you that naive? Get the fuck out of here, dude. Don't get me wrong. I agree with you. I understand why you wrote
what? Highway to Hell was about visiting his mother-in-law, and Hell's Bells was about when he got married. I don't see how anything has to do with Satan whatsoever.
Just like that fucking Family Guy joke about the right to bear arms. It clearly means to display a pair of bare arms on the wall. That has nothing to do with anything. Funny enough, Hell's Bells is actually a tribute to Bon Scott, and Highway to Hell is about the trials and tribulations of being on the fucking road. But also at the same time, come on, man. You got to meet me halfway on this one. Like I'll defend you for artistic expression, but you can't be a dumbass and say, "Oh, I don't know how they would come after us." I mean, a rebel. That's ridiculous. No, come on, dude.
That was the worst AC/DC impression I've ever heard.
No, it wasn't an AC/DC impression, nor would I attempt to do one. Because I would never hear the fucking end of it from you two.
That none of us have the fucking voice for an AC/DC impression.
No, my voice doesn't go that high anymore. But yeah, there was a whole big thing, and even the detective who was on the case. He's like, the press made an awful lot of assumptions. They put a lot of things to that hat. When at the end of the day, the dude just wore a hat. I'm like, yeah, it was a piece of evidence, but it was just left at the scene. And then like Richard Ramirez later on was like, yeah, AC/DC inspired me. And I remember hearing that. I'm like, get the fuck out of here, dude. You're just crazy. You would tag yourself onto anything that you thought might get you the insanity plea. But anyway, I digress. I figured I'd bring that up to your attention about
Either
Richard
way,
Ramirez.
it's fucking hilarious. Yeah, pretty interesting serial killer. I'd like to see a movie or show done on him.
Have you seen any actual clips of him or anything?
No.
Okay.
Just articles and pictures and stuff.
Because
like that.
I am kind of curious, like, because you really like the quote. So I'm really curious, like, if you ever were to see any footage of him, would that just make you go, he's the guy that said that?
No, I've seen pictures and stuff of him, so I do know what he looks like and stuff.
He's rather gangly.
Yeah.
He's not really. He doesn't look that imposing.
Because like
Depending on what pictures, there are some black and white pictures where it's just like, yeah, that's pretty fucking creepy.
Because like it just whenever like somebody posts like a quote from something or anything, I mean, I guess even from like when I've seen like negative comments about our own work, and then I'm just like, then I finally like see a picture or like a clip of the person, I'm just like, that's the guy that said that. All right.
All your power has been drained away from you. The facade of the internet. It doesn't mean much, folks. It doesn't mean much. But anyway, what was the? You said you had a horrific event that you.
Yeah, the USS Indianapolis.
Yeah, that would. I mean, anybody that's a fan of Jaws will know all about that.
It's the shark movie that I've always wanted to see, and it's the one that I would love to, if I ever get the chance, make someday.
Really fucking okay. So tell the story. Obviously it's been done in Jaws, but
Yeah, so the USS
Jaws.
Indianapolis was the ship that helped deliver the atomic bombs, and on their way back they were sunken because nobody got the memo that the war was essentially over at that point. So yeah, they were stuck. So the crew and everybody was stuck out there, and because it was such a top secret mission, nobody was going to come out to rescue them. So they were stuck out there for fucking days or months at a time, and during this process, they're just constantly getting attacked by fucking sharks. You have people out there in the middle of the ocean all alone. You have a downed fucking carrier, so that's like, it's ringing the dinner bell. Every shark and their mother's gonna come and just investigate. And yeah, people were just getting eaten alive. And there's some pretty horrific fucking tales about what these people had to go through. And I would love to see that brought to the screen, or I would love to bring it to the screen myself, because it's probably the one shark movie that has been untapped, that needs to be tapped, and it can bring shark movies to glory again, at least for hopefully a month or so.
Until the next Sharknado comes out, at least.
Shut up, Brandon.
And then it ruins everything. All the critics go, "Wow, people are really stupid." We have this beautiful, like, heroic story about all these soldiers in World War II that was done great, but they made no money at the box office. And then another Sharknado just wipes the floor with it.
Somebody call Cameron, or not Cameron, somebody call Spielberg or Nolan, and let's get this movie started.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Granted, if you call Nolan, you're going to have
No, real sharks will be in the water. People will actually die if Nolan's in there.
And the movie won't be allowed to be streamed.
No. And there will be no digital.
It'll be a real film. Fucking snuff film.
He'll force the movie to be released during a pandemic and only make a quarter of its budget in the domestic box office.
Because I don't care, because I'm Chris Nolan and I know better. Half the time, like every time I hear something that Chris Nolan has done, all I think of is fucking Dodgeball with the Globo Gym infomercial.
We're better than you,
and we know it. That's all I think of every time he's around. That's folks. That's what happens when you drink your own Kool-Aid. And you start to drink your own isms. The Nolan-isms is starting to be... When Chris Nolan is starting to do Nolan-isms, it's time to revert back to original form.
Yeah.
You've gone too far, my friend.
But yeah, the USS Indianapolis, I think that would be a great movie to watch.
I agree. I agree.
Truly horrifying experience.
What was it? It was 1,100 soldiers and only like 300 of them got out.
I think even less than that. I think it was around the 200 number or something like that. It's been a while since I've looked into it, but
it's insane how
it
was. It's really interesting because before Jaws made that story famous, a lot of people had no idea about it. It was a very under the rug type of story, and it wasn't even about classified stuff, like, or classified information, or at least from what I know, it wasn't anything about.
I mean, by the
being
time
classified.
Jaws came out, I'm sure the events of that, incident were public, knowledge or whatever at
Domain.
that point. But only history buffs are gonna know about that shit. At
or
least
Jaws,
at that point.
or Jaws fans.
Well, once Jaws came out, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome.
There's a few documentaries that do a pretty good job, but I mean, it's not like a cinematic movie experience or a horror movie, which is what I would prefer to see.
No, I hear you on that. So, B-Man.
So I knew what my pick was right away. But first, I am going to preface by saying this topic is probably a little more serious to me than to you guys.
Okay.
Because, like, when I was a kid and I was living in Virginia, like, I lived, like, right near where the DC sniper happened.
Oh.
And then, like, within a year after that happened, there was already, like, a TV movie made about it. And even as a kid, I'm just like, really? Less than a year, and the vultures are already trying to capitalize off of this?
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, didn't they do that with the Boston bombing scenario?
Yes, they did.
Yeah, it was
Yes,
like
they did.
less than a year. Was that the Mark Wahlberg
Yeah.
one or the?
Which that movie was actually a lot more respectful, and that was actually a much better movie than I thought it would have ever been. So, whereas the TV movies of the week, it's just like, they're just trying to capitalize off of it, and yeah. So when it comes to like real life stories like these, especially recent ones, I do feel there should be some degree of respect towards it. And then of course there's also like the whole pizza bomber thing that happened in Erie, Pennsylvania, which was like a half hour from where my family moved to. And of course there was like really like every like crime show just like tackled on that one after that happened. Like,
Dude, I also remember
I
they
think
made
there
a
was-
parody movie of it.
yeah,
with,
there was
what's his
the
name?
Jesse Eisenberg movie,
Yeah.
30 Minutes or Less. There was Cold Case. I think Criminal Minds did something with it.
Really?
Okay.
Or at least, those similar shows. I don't know if it was Criminal Minds specifically, but, those types of shows. It might have been NCIS. It might have been CSI. Actually, I think it was one of the CSIs now that I think about it.
Yeah, the only one I knew of was the Jesse Eisenberg movie, 30 Minutes or
Yeah,
Less.
and then of course the shotgun collar from Saw 3 is pretty much modeled after that situation as well.
Really?
Yeah,
I thought it was just the, what's it called, the bomb.
it was like a bomb collar. So
Oh, it was a collar,
yeah.
okay.
So even though in Saw 3 they turned it into like a shotgun collar, when you look at the time of when everything was made and all that, you know where they got the idea from.
Fair enough.
And then it wasn't until maybe a couple years ago where there was a four-part Netflix documentary called Evil Genius, which actually went through the case and everything. And it was actually a much more bizarre case than what was just live on the news that day. And I thought that documentary actually did a very respectful job of it as well. And I even learned a few things from that documentary that I didn't know beforehand. Because, yeah, when you watch a movie, it is easy to forget that these are real people that were affected by everything. So I think the least a movie could do is at least be respectful, serious, and try to be as accurate as possible. That's also one of the reasons why I think Zodiac is probably one of the, if not the best serial killer movie ever made.
Fair enough.
So with that little preface, my pick, I first learned about this like right after it happened, when my brother was driving me home from college one day. We both finished our classes, we're going home. And we'd always listen to like these two guys on the radio. I forget who they were, but they were talking about Anthony Sowell and the Cleveland Murder House. And he was also been dubbed as the Cleveland Strangler. And so what makes this case interesting is, well, I'll go into a little background first. So when he was convicted, they found basically 11 remains of bodies in his home. How they found him was in September 2009. He invited this woman to his home for a drink, and according to the police report, after a few drinks, he became agitated, hit her, choked her, raped her as she was passed out, and I guess she actually managed to escape. When the police found her, they found, I believe, 5 bodies inside the house, 5 bodies buried in a shallow grave in his backyard, and there was a skull to an 11th body just wrapped in a paper bag. With the exception of 2 of the bodies that were too badly decomposed for the coroners to say what happened to them, every death was through strangulation, either with his bare hands or with the aid of like a wire or a cord or something like that. So the interesting part of this case is leading up to the discovery of the bodies, there is actually a meatpacking company called Ray's Sausage that was being blamed for the horrible smell coming from that area of the neighborhood, to the point where the government actually forced them to do like all these like really expensive repairs and cleanings. Like they completely redid their sewage system and everything, and like tens of thousands of dollars of repairs that were then later discovered to be from the decomposing bodies that this man murdered.
Wow.
And I was researching this a little bit beforehand, and the last I can find of this was an article from 3 years ago. And the owner of Ray's Sausage was talking about how they are still just barely hanging on because of how many thousands of dollars they had that the government forced them to spend, but they hadn't gotten any aid back because, like,
it turns out that they had nothing to do with what was going on. It had to do with this fucking serial killer. Jesus.
Yeah, so they kind of got really screwed over on this one. So it's like this man murdered 11 people and his actions are still affecting a business.
Wow.
I couldn't find anything about Ray's Sausage today. So I'm hoping the situation for them is better. But then, of course, we're in the times that we're in right now.
Yep.
But, of course, everybody still needs food. So if there's any business that could kind of hang on during this time, people are always going to need food, regardless of situation. But I hope they're still hanging on. I think it's a really crummy situation that the government forced them to do all these repairs, and then it's like, oh, whoops, wasn't you. Yeah, we're not going to help you out with that. So I think that's just a crummy situation. I do believe Anthony Sowell is currently on death row. Yeah, so it looks like he did get the death penalty. Still sitting on death row, though. So yeah, I think that could be an interesting movie. A serial killer can affect more than just the people he kills. Like we all talk about like what kind of person they like. Everybody talks about the serial killer themselves, and of course like the direct victims. But nobody really thinks about like any outstanding economic effects that serial killers can have on the areas around them. There hasn't been that much made about him. All I could find, according to Wikipedia at least, was there was like a short half-hour documentary made for some TV series, and then there was a Cleveland filmmaker that made a documentary that played at the Cleveland International Film Festival, but nothing on the scale of like an actual movie or like the Netflix Evil Genius documentary. So nothing on like a large production scale that's been made yet.
It's really fucking cool because I wouldn't have known about this.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have known about this at all.
Yeah, and it does on surface kind of sound ridiculous. A sausage factory being blamed for the smells coming from these dead bodies, and essentially
we've approached Sweeney Todd a level of
then
insanity.
when you actually think about it, it's like, oh no, this is actually a really serious situation.
Oh yeah, 100%, 110%. The and it's crazy too. You know, I just thought it was funny that you brought up like the DC sniper shooting. You know, I remember a bunch of my picks, and we'll get to that in a second. Was talking about things that happened way before I was born. But it's funny that some of this shit, happened very much when we were all around. I mean, we all remember, I remember the DC shooting going on. Another fucking thing that was that video games came into play of being blamed for. They blamed Halo. Saying that the DC sniper
that one
shooter,
they blamed Halo for?
Yeah, they said it was Halo's fault that the DC shooter.
course
I
it
don't
is.
remember
A sci-fi
Halo being
shooter.
blamed. I just remember a lot of parents being afraid to send their kids to school.
There was a lot
and
of
like
that
they
too.
wouldn't let any of the kids outside for like during that entire time either.
Yeah. Well, that's the funny thing. I mean, another thing that just grips a community and grips
Yeah.
fear's a motherfucker. Let's be perfectly honest. We discover and talk about a genre that's all about fear. So
Because like with the sniper, it was if I remember right, there was somebody specific that he was trying to kill, but he was also picking a lot of random other people just to try to throw off any kind of motive.
Yeah.
And that's what really set people off. It's these kills are random and they're happening from afar.
And also in broad daylight.
Yeah.
I mean, a bunch of people got picked off in a fucking Walmart parking lot. It turns out it was a father and son duo. That was the other big thing about that. Yeah, that was weird. That was weird. That was a weird. A lot of weird fucking shit. People kind of lost their minds in the post 9/11, like 5 years around that time. In between the time was really strange. I believe that was like 2004 or 2005. The
DC sniper?
yeah,
No, it was a lot earlier than that.
was it 03 or 02?
If they were blaming Halo, then it would have to have been around like 2000, 2001.
Well, I mean, Halo came out in 2001. Would have been right around there.
3 weeks in October 2002.
Okay, all right, yeah, it was right there. So almost at the end of 02 at that point.
All right.
So yeah, it was interesting. It was a weird time. It's a weird time. But yeah, another one that gripped a community.
Okay, my mistake. 2003. So it came out literally a year after.
Jesus.
October 03. Like pretty much, yeah, exactly 1 year after.
Fucking vultures. It's fucking insane. So, did you have another event or another?
No, that was it.
That kind of combined the two
Yeah.
events and everything else. So I got a few things. One in particular I love because I actually think it's from a very dark comedy perspective. I would love to see a dark comedy done in it. I was researching serial killers for another project, and there's this dude named Pee Wee Gaskins. Killed like 111 people in South Carolina in like the early 1900s before DNA and fingerprints and all that shit. And the crazy part was he literally drove around in a hearse with a bumper sticker that says "We haul dead people." When he was arrested by the cops, he said, "I drove around in a hearse because it was a lot easier to transport the people that I had murdered to my private cemetery." So I would love to do a dark comedy about a serial killer that drives around in a fucking hearse with an obvious bumper sticker and just see how many
Talk about
people.
hiding in plain sight.
Oh, dude!
Yeah.
And when I read the fact, I'm like, get the fuck out of here!
Fucking pure definition. Jesus Christ.
And I was like, if you ever wanted to know what zero fucks look like, that's the guy right there. And he killed 100 to like 112 people. This is fucking insane. They never found him because he had a private. I think he actually worked in a cemetery or owned a cemetery, so he's literally able to bury the bodies in a cemetery. So it was like Breaking Bad shit where they, spoiler alert, when they hide the fucking meth lab underneath the laundromat and then all the chemicals go through naturally. It's like that kind of shit. Like the organization behind it is almost pure. Where there's no interruptions to how they can never find the bodies because they're in a fucking graveyard where bodies belong. So, and I was like, this is crazy. But I didn't really know too much more about him except for that. But the fact alone, I'm like this is 100% something that needs to be covered in a dark comedy. The other two though were pretty serious, and they're both here in Chicago. and they kind of both gripped communities. One was in the late 60s and one was in the 80s. The one in the 80s is a lot more simple to explain. Was the Tylenol thing. I don't know if you guys know about the whole thing with Tylenol. It was a huge controversy. So in like the 1980s, they did not have seals on the Tylenol.
Yeah.
So somebody that's a real scary part. They never caught the person. Literally walked into a bunch of supermarkets and put cyanide in the Tylenol pills, and like I think 7 or 8 people died, and there was a huge mass panic of a bunch of stuff being compromised, and that's where the federal government had to come in and say, hey, for all pain medication or things like that, they had to put that warning label: if this seal is broken, the do not consume. It was because of that particular serial killer, and that was a huge thing that was going on, and it's frightening to figure out that no one was ever caught for that. It just kind of and as soon as the seals were introduced, and never happened again in any other medication, or at least not to our knowledge. It kind of became this thing of folklore. Like it kind of became into the zeitgeist of like putting the razor blades in the apples and shit like that. That was always really cool. But the other one that was really cool was Richard Speck, who was who ironically enough very similar to like I don't know if you guys ever saw the movie Frequency. I highly recommend it. It's a fun.
I've never seen it, but I know the Reno 911 joke.
If you know the Reno 911 joke, it's a good movie. It's one of those like Sunday morning afternoon movies that I recommend. Something to like catch on cable and like you watch it. And there's a serial killer element with it called the Nightingale Murders, and it's all a guy who kills nurses. And I think there's a tiny bit of correlation between him, same time period, and then same MO. This guy Richard went into a whole room where a bunch of nurses in training were at, and then killed them all in the middle of their sleep. And actually, it's referenced in Mad Men. When the grandmother is falling asleep with a butcher knife, and the young girl asks her why she's sleeping with a butcher knife. It's because of all the things that happened in Chicago, and it's actually made a reference in that show. And I remember I did a report on the '60s. I'm talking with my nana, and she's like, yeah, like the whole city was in a panic. They didn't know what the hell was going on because they didn't catch him for days. And there was like one witness. She was crazy unreliable. And nobody had ever seen anything like that. To have young women be brutalized that badly. And the funny thing is, it became commonplace in horror for a bunch of young women to get murdered and everything else. But this is long before anything like that was ever seen or known in pop culture. So it was pretty horrific. And I mean, I remember literally telling my Aunt Debbie, "Hey, go to the local store and go get me A, B, and C, but don't fucking wander. Do not do anything else. You literally go there and you fucking come right back. Do not fucking, if you're gone for more than 10 minutes, I know exactly how long it takes you to get from point A to point B. I'm coming to fucking find you." And I love Brandon and Zach are both laughing because they both know my nana. They know how that conversation probably went. So it was crazy to learn more about that. And he's not one of those that gets referenced a lot. Like, especially in the 1960s, everybody talks about Manson and, a couple other ones that became big in the 70s. So it happened like right at the same time, and he kind of gets overshadowed by Manson. So you don't really know a lot about him. And I thought it was interesting because before that report, I had never heard of him before. But it's funny how he's just popped up in other things, in Frequency, and then also in Mad Men. I'm like, oh, I know exactly who the fuck that is. But the funny thing is, had I not done that report, I would have just, oh, it's just some serial killer, because it was a crazy time when Mad Men were being talked about. But I thought it was really interesting, and I think that'd be a cool story to do, to talk about the actual murders themselves and the manhunt to go after this guy, but also the panic that it put over Chicago during that time, because a lot of people don't. It wasn't the level of panic that like Son of Sam had, because Son of Sam went on for longer, but it was very, very truncated. And Chicago hadn't, experienced anything quite like that up until that point. So I think it'd be a real interesting thing to focus on. And the last thing I'll mention, the last two things I'll mention was, one, there was a guy that I did acting with that looked just the fuck like the kid from Columbine. Like, he looked just like him, and I'm like, this dude would be perfect to play, one of the guys in Columbine. And that's an interesting story. It'd be interesting to see how everything, done. I would do it very much like the style of a lot of those movies in the late '90s, Fight Club and Woody Harrelson. It's the movie in the '90s, Natural Born Killers. It'd be very much like in that kind of style of Natural Born Killers and Fight Club, that kind of dark, angsty kind of '90s look to it. It'd be real interesting to do. And then the last thing, just because it's fucking batshit insane, and I think like Lifetime probably did a fucking bullshit version of it, but I don't care to even look it up because it's probably awful. But the whole thing with Amanda Berry was fucking bizarre. I don't know if you guys ever knew about that. It was Amanda Berry and like a couple other girls that got kidnapped by a guy, and they literally were locked in his basement for like 15 years.
Oh, this fucking story.
Yeah, like people thought that she was dead, and like all the other girls were dead.
Yeah.
And one of them had the guy. One of the girls had the guy's kid, because he fucking raped her and they had a kid. It was fucking insane.
Yeah.
Like you like, and that was that whole like joke where that one neighbor who kind of had the crazy hair, was a black guy, he had the crazy hair, and he was calling the cops, and he's like, I was really fucking confused because I was on the phone with them, and like she said, I'm Amanda Berry, call 911. He's like, I'm calling for Amanda Berry, and it's like, I thought Amanda Berry was dead. Amanda Berry was the other girl. And it was just this fucking insane story about this dude who literally, in suburbia, normal life, it literally had like 3 girls locked in his fucking basement and a kid locked in his basement.
Yeah, it's me and Wes were talking about that story a few years back, and it's just like, Jesus fucking Christ. Could you imagine 15 years being locked in a basement for your entire... That's a fucked up scenario to be in, man.
Dude,
with a kid.
Yeah, it was Elizabeth Smart and Amanda Berry. I think it was 15 years. It was 15 fucking years in Salt Lake City. It was fucking bizarre. And he was the truest definition of a sociopath, because the neighbor who actually found her and then called the cops, and he's the one who got everything started. Like, he's like, I knew this guy. Like, he lived in that house for years. Like, he used to come over to my house and we used to have barbecues and shit. He's like, I never knew that anything was going on. Like, he would look at me in the eye and treat me like a neighbor all the time. I had no clue. And like, that's what's really scary, because this dude had no distinction between what the fuck was going on in his basement and then what was going on in the outside world.
The best serial killers are the best actors.
Shit. If trauma taught us anything, what was that quote from that book, Brandon? Most people that are talented are either unreliable or crazy.
Pretty much.
Or both.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was just fucking bizarre. Like this crazy story, and I would love to do a story on this guy who was able to. I would make the focus on him, the actual serial killer, because it'd be fucking fascinating to watch this dude literally do this shit in the basement and then walk right up and then live with the rest of us up in society. It was almost like he was the devil, and he'd go down to hell in his basement and act like the devil, but as soon as he went up to earth, he would act like the rest of us. And just is unfucking believable to be somebody be stuck for 15 years in the basement. Yeah, he used to like make them think that they were that he had left home, and he would hide. And then he's basically conditioning them. So they would come up and they would think he was gone, and he would be really quiet, and then they would run for the door, and he'd fucking grab them and then beat the shit out of them and throw them back down in the basement. Like, basically the same way that they train elephants in the circus. Like, you know how when they're infants, they put around like a huge weight around their neck. So when they grow up and everything else, once they're around their neck, they don't, psychologically, they're conditioned to know that they can't lift it. When in fact, they could lift it, but because they were conditioned as a child not to be able to do that physical exercise, they believe it into adulthood. And got to that kind of level of sociopath bullshit. And it's horrifying, but it's all, it's also fascinating at the same time. So it was just fucking bizarre. A crazy situation. And obviously a lot of people make fun of the neighbor because he's kind of a weird, eccentric dude. But at the end of the day, he did in fact save her. So more power to him. But yeah, it was just fucking crazy. That was mine. Those are mine. I do have a question though of the podcast, unless you guys have any other things that you just remembered while you're talking.
Gasp! I pretty much said everything I need to say.
Fair enough. Now, we're talking about things that we would do in horrific events. What's something that you wouldn't do? What's something that you saw that you were just like, you know what, I can't do that? What's something that you're like, you know what, I don't need to see that. I don't want to see that. I wouldn't want to make it. It'd be too personal. It'd be too, whatever the case may be. I know what I wouldn't do, but I'm very curious to hear what would.
Nothing.
Nothing?
No. Like, honestly, the more fucked up and horrifying it is, the more intrigued I'm going to be, and the more I'm probably going to want to make it.
Fair enough. Brandon?
Yeah, but that's just me.
I'm done with people being tied to chairs, because there is that one point in my life where it's like right after I graduated, just the only short films I was being asked to help make were people tied to chairs. And there was one that was in a garage, that was specifically in a garage.
Okay, it wasn't ours.
Which was the infamous "I'm not pressing record for you until you get these people some food" situation.
I thought you were going to draw the line at Mark.
Yours was the last one, but it's like, just no. I'm done. I can only film somebody tied to a chair from so many angles before I just go, this isn't even creative or fun, and I'm sure you're expecting something more along the lines of, this is too messed up that I don't want to do it. But I mean, it's for the most part, I do agree with Zach. It's not what we're showing, but it's how we're doing it.
Agreed.
But for me, I've gone through person tied to a chair so many times that I just have no desire to ever film something like that ever again.
Fair enough.
I still blame you for taking your pants off.
I know. I think the one thing, I think I approach it more from it's not about the subject matter. I agree with you guys. It's not about the subject matter. It's about how you tackle it. Yeah. And I think there's one event that I just wouldn't know how to tackle, so I don't even want to approach it. It was probably Sandy Hook. I don't even know how I would do that.
Like, I personally wouldn't do it just because I don't know much about it, but
it's just one of those things that, like, I don't even know how to do that, like, in a way that is effective, and like, I wouldn't even want to try to figure that puzzle out.
Give it time.
Some of
these you gotta wait a while and let people cool down.
Yeah,
how many years ago was Sandy Hook
now?
It
was like 5, I want to say.
Roughly?
5 or 6. It was one of those things, man. It's just like, I don't know. I can handle, I know how to map things out in my
December
head.
2012.
Oh, wow.
A lot further back than I thought. Okay, Jesus Christ.
That is further back. So now we're to my
it's like, I'm not against it happening, and I don't know, if somebody really wanted me to do it, I guess, all right, sure, I would need a proper team to help guide me through that one.
Like,
but
it kind of goes back to what I said earlier, is there has to be that proper degree of respect.
Exactly.
Because like those people went through something. I don't wish that on anybody.
And neither do I, and that's kind of why I picked it.
Even just like some of the aftermath stuff, where it's like, I was reading an article about this one father who lost his daughter, and because one newspaper accidentally misprinted the date as like the day before, he's been harassed by so many people saying, your daughter isn't really dead, it's a big conspiracy. And it's just like, come on, realize. So it's not just the event itself, but there's a lot of like super messed up stuff.
The conspiracy theory
well.
Aftermath thing that came after that was really just
disgusting.
There's a lot of crazy shit that happened. I think there's that too. I don't have a, everybody always talks about like, a lot of motivational people talk about the why you do things. But the why is always the more important thing. But the second most important thing is how. I don't know what the why is, and I don't know what the how is, and I wouldn't even know how to navigate those waters. And that's kind of where I'm like, I'm just gonna be out.
Give it enough time, thought, and prep. I could do the how, but the why, it's another horror movie. Why do we watch slashers? We like watching people die.
I think it's more different though because it's further away from our own reality. I was talking to somebody recently about that. Like she's like, I have no problem with, with the Freddys of the world and the Jasons of the world and everything else. It's only when you get closer to reality do I have a problem. Same thing what your mom said, why she wouldn't show Jaws to you. And as silly as it fucking sounds, there's actually some merit to it. The Freddy and Jason and that other bullshit, they don't exist. But sharks do in fact exist.
Sure, I do agree to a degree, but I also like real, true, horrifying events. Hell, it's part of our fucking show.
Well, you bring up a good point.
One of the biggest episodes I would love to do for Living Nightmares is the, what's it called? Batman shooting. Because there's actually a real live account of what somebody experienced in that theater, and it's truly fucking horrifying. And I think that would be a great episode to bring to the show.
And that's,
But again, we got to, do it properly.
You know what? And that one I would be way more willing to take on because that actually has a, I vaguely more personal connection with that because I was actually I was nowhere near Colorado, and nor do I even want to pretend that my life is even remotely close to what they said. But I was in fact at a midnight premiere of that movie.
We've all done midnight premieres before. Hell, I did midnight premieres for every Star Wars and Spider-Man movie in existence.
Yeah.
Well, no, not every Spider-Man. Every real Spider-Man movie.
Yeah.
End of story.
It was interesting waking up the next day and watching CNN. I'm like, holy fuck, I was at a midnight premiere, and then
Did I remember
Colorado's no different than Illinois or anywhere else in the world or in the country.
That was my first quarter of school. I remember everybody was so excited to see the Batman movie. I'm a Batman fan, but I'm not like I didn't really care for the Nolan movies all that much, so I didn't bother. But I came to school and everybody's fucking talking about it. I'm like, Jesus Christ, what the fuck happened? And then a few years later, I'd end up working at a Cinemark myself. I didn't even know that it was a Cinemark that got hit eventually. Yeah. I'm doing maintenance with my boss, and it's just like, Jesus Christ, we got some pretty hardcore security. Well, yeah, after our fucking branch got blamed for the fucking Batman shooting, we had to do it. Wait, that was a Cinemark? Yep. Well, that explains a lot.
And all the like costumes got banned at midnight premieres.
You're not allowed to wear masks or anything like they take security super serious. At least at Cinemark, AMC and all that. I don't know their rules and regulations. I just know Cinemark, they take that shit very seriously.
No. I remember afterwards. I remember going to a few AMC's and there was a couple signs at the door because there was a couple like bigger premieres after that. Like maybe the next year or so. I think there was a few like. A couple of the big Marvel movies had come out at that time, and they were like, no masks, no, we want to be able to see everybody. AMC had invested in a bunch of like facial recognition shit. So like,
I didn't see any of that.
There was a lot of that going on.
The only other theater I know that had some hardcore like rules and shit was Regal, because that's where me, Matt, and Ray would go to watch all the Star Wars movies, and they wouldn't allow us to bring our lightsabers in there when we went to go see Star Wars.
I remember that.
I was able to get by with my Kylo Ren mask during The Force Awakens, but that was about it.
Yeah,
I saw a bunch of people were all just like, as soon as we got past the security guard, whoop.
It's interesting when art imitates life and life imitates art, and that line is very, very thin. And it's even more introspective and more philosophical for people who actually do that. It's fascinating for people who are fans of movies, but people who make them, it's even more interesting because we're dabbling in the balance between life and art every day. Not every day, but pretty damn near close. Or at least if we had our way, we'd be doing it every day.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. That one was weird. That one was a weird one for me because I was in theater. I was making films at the time, and I think all of us were at that time. And when life and art kind of slammed together in a weird way, it's interesting. It's an interesting introspective time. It was weird. It was a weird thing.
I've been kind of thinking about this, and it's like, like for me, I don't know if I would take on that subject matter as a project. But like I said, it kind of just comes down to how it's done. And also it's like, and this is something that goes with like literally any script that comes my way. One question I always ask myself is this something that I just want to do?
That's a good point.
A lot of times it's just like, do I have, but it's like, okay, like right after that event happened, like within, I think it was actually, Zach and I went to the same school. He was well behind me. I think I saw you in the hallway in a couple.
I know I've seen you
classrooms.
around
Yeah.
the school at that point. I want to say you were around 2 years.
But we
ahead of me.
we never actually interacted in the school.
Yeah.
But I saw you around a couple times towards the end of my time there.
Yeah.
So Dark Knight Rises would have been about 2 years before I graduated, because I graduated.
So yeah,
in
you were
14.
2 years ahead of me then.
Yeah.
All right.
So I graduated in 14.
Yeah.
This was summer 2012, and I think it was the same quarter as this. And my roommate, one of my roommates, was an illustration student, and one of the projects he had that quarter was you had to make like a 8 or 10 page like little comic book, not a flip book, but like something that you can actually read with a complete story and everything. And you had to make copies for everybody in the class. And there was one that he brought back that one of his classmates made, and he just said, "Read this." I was like, okay.
Nothing like having that statement thrown at you and with that
Just
gravitas.
a hardcore deadpan. Just read this.
That's the bro equivalent of, dude, you gotta check this the fuck out.
So it was like, okay. And so it started out with just like this scrawny guy getting ready for a date, picking up, this girl from her home. And it's like, her father's like, I mean, this boy clearly doesn't work out. He's like, who is he? Like, it's like everybody's like making fun of this kid. And then the ending is they're at a movie theater, and the movie theater gets shot up, and he actually steps in front of the girl. He himself gets killed, of course not. And the ending was something like, at least he's not some piece of shit who would just run away during a shooting. And I'm just like, oh.
What timing?
A version of the story like that, I would not touch with a 100-foot pole, because that was just a clear.
Okay, so did he make that because of the shooting, or was this just perfectly timed?
This was well enough time. This is like later in the quarter.
Okay,
so this
because I can't remember where in the quarter it happened. I want to say it had to have been in the middle or the end.
Yeah.
So to do an illustration like that, do all the drawing and get that all done, plus make copies, that would take time.
That part of that was maybe just the last page or two.
Okay.
Of it, but still, it's like to go through that and to use an event like that to make a point like that. Yeah, I'm not touching that. Whereas like if I were to get a script based on the event that's more in the vein of like Patriots Day, I would be more inclined to take on a project like that. Yeah. So that kind of just goes back to what I said. It's why are you doing it, but also how are you doing it as well. And like I said earlier, there should be, and especially if you're going with something that is still super, like not super recent, but recent enough where there are people still blatantly affected by it, you gotta have that degree of respect.
I agree. And I always approach every script with what I pretty much almost exactly the same way that you do, Brandon, which is would I enjoy to see this as because I'm a movie fan? Would I enjoy to watch this? That's
if I were to see my name on those credits, would I be proud that my name are on those credits?
Well, that's true too. Would you be proud of it? There's a bunch of shit that I enjoy that I'm not proud that I enjoy it. But there's a lot of bad artistic stuff, and I think that opens me up for more opportunities. But here's a very ironic twist of fate. That actually happened. I don't know if you guys know that story. That actually happened. There was a guy who was there with his date, and
I know it happened.
I don't know if you knew that.
But
happened.
I'm saying.
Oh no, I know. I hear what you're saying.
The point that the story was trying to make
is very
in the way that it was trying to make
it's
it.
Bad.
It felt very middle school
bullshit.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I agree. I find it ironic that it's even somewhat more even based on the true aspects of it. And that's what makes it even feel even weirder is
Yeah.
because if that was like a fictitious thing within the story, a guy jumps in front of a bullet to save his girlfriend and everything else, like, yeah, I guess I would forgive a little bit more, but with it being an actual true story within that story, that's even worse. So yeah, no, I agree with you. It's interesting.
Like it was it was way more exploitive than honoring,
And that,
as opposed to Patriots Day, which is, I mean, there's still that degree of exploitation because they made a movie that makes millions of dollars in box office.
Correct. On
But
something.
in terms of actually watching it and how I feel watching it, it feels a lot more honoring than exploitive.
yeah, that's all. And now you get into all kinds of crazy shit, like what the responsibility of an artist is. When it comes to telling those stories, and that's a topic for another day. But it's a cool thing to talk about. But
There's an infinite number of situations.
oh yeah, the list can go on and on and on. So we'll go ahead and wrap it up here. Final thoughts,
Squirrels.
Brandon.
Like I said, I feel I've said everything I have to say.
Fair enough. And you know what? I think I've said everything I have to say as well. So thank you so much. Send us out, Brandon.
All right. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Nightmares Podcast. You can listen to all of our previous episodes wherever podcasts are available. And also be sure to check us out on our social media at Midwest Horror Network on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and
Slasher.
And of course, if you are checking this out on YouTube, please stab that like button, smash that subscribe, and click that little dinghy bell to be notified every time we drop amazing content right here on the Midwest Horror Network channel. And also, if you are checking this out on Spotify or any other podcast streaming services, press that follow button to also be notified every time we drop a new episode of the Nightmares Podcast. Thank you so much, and we will see you all next time. Bye.